Days are very stressful. I mean, ever since the Friday morning when we noticed that the children were gone. The very first day I wasn't around very much because I was just searching. I was running through the woods, screaming their name till my throat hurt. Probably come out if you have anything, come out as fast as possible and get it to any detachment or any police service that you have available to get to talk to. I think their side of the family doesn't believe me, and I just want to clear it up for everyone. Clear it up for everyone, not just the people online making crazy accusations and everything else.
At first, Daniel said it was an accident. The kids just went missing. He tried his best. That's what he told everyone. And just like that, the story flipped. From missing children to a mother going mad to fight for custody. Now, Daniel is finally speaking up. About what happened. About Malaya. About status of the kids. And why it took this long to tell the truth. Will it help find them? Or is it already too late? The role of Daniel Martell. When it comes to Daniel Martell, people often talk about the glaring contradictions between what he said and what he actually did. Contradictions that have placed him at the center of countless theories and suspicions surrounding this case. So first, let's take a closer look at Daniel's role and what exactly he did or didn't do. When Jack and Lily went missing, Daniel was the former boyfriend, or at least had a close relationship, with Malaya, the mother of the two missing children, Jack and Lily. He wasn't their biological father, but he had lived with them for a time and played an active role in their lives, leading up to their disappearance. In fact, Daniel was one of the known people to have seen Malaya and the children before they vanished, placing him at the center of the investigation from the very beginning. After Jack and Lily went missing, Daniel appeared to take part in the search efforts. He joined others in combing through wooded areas, even making a public statement on television, "If I have to, I'll search for the rest of my life." While some took this as a sign of sincerity, others found it unsettling, almost as if he had already accepted that the children would never be found alive. Because of his proximity to the children and Malaya in those critical hours, Daniel quickly became a person of interest. Some believed he may have directly harmed the kids, or at the very least, helped cover up whatever Malaya had done. His behavior during interviews and public appearances only fueled these suspicions. There were inconsistencies in his account, moments where his wording felt carefully chosen, like when he said, "Weh," instead of "should," while describing actions that should have solely involved Malaya. Despite the suspicion surrounding him, another theory also gained traction, that Daniel was being used as a scapegoat. Some believed Malaya and her family were intentionally redirecting attention onto him to deflect suspicion away from themselves. In this version of events, Daniel was the fall guy. Naive, overly trusting, and emotionally attached to someone who may have manipulated him. At one point, Daniel even expressed a willingness to take a polygraph test to prove his innocence. This offer added a layer of complexity to how people perceived him. While many remained doubtful, others began to reconsider their assumptions. They noted his emotional state, his body language, and his apparent confusion as signs of someone overwhelmed rather than deceptive. For them, Daniel was no longer the monster they once believed he was, but perhaps a broken man caught in something far beyond his control. In the interviews, Daniel gave a series of statements to the police following the disappearance of Jack and Lily. Statements that have since become a point of contention. According to him, he had no idea the children were going to stay home that day. He said Malaya, their mother, called the school at 6:18 a.m. to report their absence, but he only found out about this later when checking the call logs on her phone. He turned this information over to investigators as part of his cooperation. Daniel also presented what he believed could be potential evidence: a piece of a blanket, torn and left in the trash, which he claimed had been dragged out by a bear or some other animal. Later, he said that Malaya's family reported finding that same piece of blanket high up in a tree, something that didn't sit right with him. According to Daniel, the family hadn't been involved in the actual search in that area, raising suspicion in his mind about how they could have known to look there. His communication with the family was sporadic at best. Daniel reportedly exchanged a few messages with Belinda, the children's grandmother, but he never responded directly to her or followed up. This silence was taken personally by the family, especially given the emotional weight of the situation. To many, Daniel seemed evasive, unwilling to be transparent, and more concerned with defending his own image than helping to uncover what happened to the kids. Daniel did engage with the public. He appeared in multiple interviews and spoke during live streams to share his side. But instead of offering a complete timeline or clear narrative, he often came across as defensive and self-centered. Viewers noted that he talked a lot about what he had done, how he was coping, less about Jack and Lily themselves. This, combined with his awkward expressions, like what some described as a smirk during a birthday video for Lily, caused even more suspicion. Further complicating things was an accusation that Daniel may have physically harmed Jack. One person claimed the boy returned from Daniel's care with bruises and scratches. While these claims were never substantiated by authorities, and Daniel denied them outright. The mere existence of the accusation added another layer of discomfort to his story. No charges were ever filed, but it stuck in the public's mind. In the end, Daniel's version of events was fragmented, lacking emotional clarity, and often reactive. Even as he maintained that he was telling the truth, many questioned whether his truth was the whole truth, or a version but to protect someone else. For the doubts from both the community and the family, and most of them pointed directly at Daniel. To begin with, Daniel's timeline of events was unclear. Details changed slightly with each retelling, and some parts didn't line up with what others had said or what was on the record. This inconsistency made people wonder if he was hiding something, or at the very least, not being completely honest. It didn't help that he avoided giving a full account from beginning to end, instead offering small bits and vague references. One message that stirred even more doubt came from Malaya herself. She reportedly asked Daniel, "Why didn't you go look for my kids?" A raw, direct question that made it seem like even she didn't fully trust him. If the mother of the missing children had doubts, how could anyone else feel certain? Then there was Patty, a family acquaintance, who claimed she had seen bruises and scratches on Jack after he'd been in Daniel's care. She believed Daniel might have hurt him. But there was no police report, no confirmation from Malaya, and nothing concrete tying Daniel to any abuse. Still, the idea stuck around, especially in online forums and among people who followed the case closely. What unsettled many the most, though, wasn't what Daniel said, it was how he acted. He rarely showed the kind of grief or urgency people expected from someone so close to the children. In interviews and videos, he often seemed distracted or defensive, sometimes even oddly calm. To some, that came off as cold. To others, it was a red flag. People began to ask, if he truly cared, why didn't he look devastated? Why wasn't he out every day, searching? Why did he seem more focused on clearing his name than finding the kids? All of it added up. Not to proof, but to a storm of suspicion. In an overall viewpoint, Daniel's behavior eventually has raised countless questions, not only about what he may have known, but about who he is as a person. There have been repeated observations suggesting that Daniel may be neurodivergent. Several people described his mannerisms as awkward, almost childlike, and emotionally flat. Others pointed out his apparent difficulty in maintaining eye contact and his tendency to smirk or smile in moments when a more somber demeanor was expected. While none of this constitutes guilt, it painted a picture that made it easy for the public to misunderstand or mistrust him. The idea that Daniel might be on the autism spectrum or struggling with some form of neurological difference was not openly discussed by him, but circulated quietly in online communities dissecting his behavior. Adding to the perception of immaturity was his YouTube channel, which focused on Pokémon content. In isolation, that may seem trivial. But in the context of a missing children case, many felt it reinforced the image of a man who was emotionally underdeveloped or stuck in a younger mental state. He didn't present himself like a grieving father figure. He presented more like someone unsure of how to handle responsibility or stress. People who interacted with Daniel also described him as withdrawn and defensive. He didn't communicate openly with the family of the victims. He left messages unanswered. He avoided direct confrontation. These tendencies, paired with his vague and often fragmented public statements, gave the impression of someone hiding something, even if what he was hiding was just fear or shame, not guilt. What emerged was a psychological profile of a man who may not be malicious, but who is ill-equipped for crisis. Daniel seemed more reactive than proactive, more confused than calculated. Whether that made him incapable of telling the full truth, or simply incapable of expressing, it clearly remains part of the mystery. Beside the personality, Daniel's pattern of communication throughout the case raised deep concerns within the family and the broader community. After Jack and Lily went missing, multiple family members attempted to reach out to him. Most notably Belinda, the children's grandmother. She sent him messages, asking for answers, for cooperation, for anything that could bring clarity. Daniel saw those messages, read them, but never responded, not once. His silence wasn't just absence, it was personal. Belinda, the biological grandmother of the kids, told that she didn't interpret his lack of reply as neutrality. To her, it was cruelty, a deliberate distancing. When someone refuses to engage in a time of crisis, especially when they were one of the last people seen with the children, that silence feels like betrayal. And for a grandmother desperate for the truth, it hurt deeply. More than just ignoring texts, Daniel actively avoided speaking directly with Belinda. He steered clear of any face-to-face communication. When asked why he wouldn't just talk to the family, Daniel gave no satisfying explanation. This avoidance only fueled suspicions. It wasn't just that he didn't know what to say, it was that he chose not to say anything at all. In a case already clouded by missing details and emotional confusion, Daniel's unwillingness to communicate clearly, openly, and consistently made everything worse. His distance, his choice to remain unreachable, became a wound the family couldn't ignore. Daniel Martell's latest leaked texts. In truth, the recently leaked messages from Daniel marked a major turning point, not just in how he communicated, but in what he chose to reveal. Gone were the vague, open-ended statements. Gone was the attention he once let orbit around himself. This time, Daniel shifted the spotlight entirely. Not toward justice, not toward grief, but toward Malaya. His tone changed. His words took aim. Suddenly, the woman once seen as a grieving mother became, in his telling, something else entirely, an unstable figure, spiraling out of control, locked in a custody battle. She was losing both, emotionally and mentally. Daniel didn't just cast doubt on her actions. He painted a portrait of someone incapable of holding it together. Someone whose behavior, in his view, had been raising red flags long before the kids ever disappeared. It started in a live stream 10 days ago, where Daniel suddenly appeared in the chat channel. He wasn't scheduled to be there. No one invited him. But there he was, in the chat, under a username that matched his old YouTube account from 2012. As mentioned, it's a channel known for posting Pokémon videos. The hosts verified it. It was him. And what followed was a flood. Not of denial or defense like before, but of anger, desperation, and a striking shift in tone. This was not the same Daniel people had seen in past interviews. Something had changed. Or maybe something had broken. At the center of that fracture was Meadow. Daniel had stayed mostly quiet for months, avoiding specifics, dancing around the truth, often accused of being vague, self-centered, or simply unhelpful. But this night, all that restraint disappeared. He claimed that Malaya, his ex, and the mother of his daughter, was on the run. Not just avoiding reporters or skipping court appearances, She was actively fleeing from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And she wasn't alone. She had Meadow with her. That, Daniel said, was the reason he came forward. According to him, Malaya was spiraling. She had violated CPS protocols by taking Meadow without the required 24/7 supervision. He wrote that she broke CPS protocols, and now Meadow is at risk of being taken? He went further, alleging that Malehya had threatened to kill herself if authorities tried to take Meadow from her. This wasn't just about hiding from accountability anymore. This was about danger. Real, immediate danger to their daughter. Daniel painted a picture of a woman unraveling, mentally unstable, emotionally volatile, and acting out of desperation. He said the trigger wasn't just fear of losing Meadow, but the overwhelming pressure she faced from her own past. He reminded viewers that Malaya had suffered psychological trauma from her time living with Jack and Lily's biological father. And according to him, she had started fleeing on June 17th. As the chat rolled on, Daniel began pulling away the curtain on what he called the control system around Malaya, most notably, her mother Cindy. He claimed that it was Cindy who had been pulling the strings, controlling Malaya's movements, silencing her, and keeping her isolated. He accused Cindy of not just shielding Malaya from scrutiny, but of being actively involved in covering things up. He went so far as to say the family had found Jack and Lily and were hiding them, and that they had even stolen 2 of Daniel's sweaters to plant evidence against him. The accusation wasn't subtle. It was pointed and deeply personal. But his harshest words weren't for Cindy. They were for Malaya herself. He revealed that she had cut all contact with him. She had blocked him, refused to speak, even hung up the phone when she heard his voice. He recalled a disturbing contradiction. Malaya had told RCMP officers that she felt safest when she was with him. But 5 minutes later, he said, she left. That contradiction, he believed, was intentional. Not fear, not grief, but a cover. She couldn't stay around me, because she would crack. I would find out. According to Daniel, that was why she vanished so suddenly. Because being around him meant facing what she had done. And what had she done? In Daniel's view, she had stopped being a grieving mother and started acting like someone with something to hide. One of the most chilling moments in the chat was when Daniel described what Malaya took with her when she left. She only asked for the birth certificates, school photos, and 2 stuffed animals. That's all. Everything else, he said, was still in her house. To him, that detail was damning. It meant she wasn't just running with Meadow. She was preparing to take all 3 kids. And she was preparing to do it permanently. Daniel's frustration with the system also poured out. He said he had voluntarily taken a drug test and had even passed a polygraph exam. The test, he noted, focused on questions about death. And everyone passed. But despite that, he said the authorities had remained quiet, offering no clarity, and in his words, ignoring his outreach. A good news we can see here that the kids are still alive. He said, the CPS investigation into him had now turned into a criminal investigation, but gave no details on what that meant or who was being investigated. Some might ask why Daniel chose a public livestream to say all this, rather than go to the police or speak through legal channels. But the answer, at least in tone, was clear. He felt out of options. He felt unheard. And perhaps most powerfully, he felt afraid he would lose Meadow forever. His appearance wasn't calculated. It was impulsive, emotional, and raw. The kind of outburst that comes not from strategy, but from someone who believes they have nothing left to lose. It's likely, based on context, that Daniel had already reached out to authorities, and either didn't receive a response, or didn't believe any action was being taken fast enough. Speaking out on a livestream wasn't just about venting. It was about making it public, making it viral. He wanted people to know what he knew, and more importantly, he wanted to stop whatever he believed Malaya was planning. In his eyes, this wasn't just a custody dispute anymore. It was an emergency. Ultimately, what Daniel said that night was more than just information. It was a shift in narrative. For the first time, he stepped out of the ambiguous shadows and pointed clearly, unapologetically, at Malaya. Not as a victim, but as a threat. Whether what he said was true or not, the effect was undeniable. The story had changed. And Daniel had made sure no one would look at her the same way again. There have been several updates since then that follow, proving what Daniel spoke during the livestream, casting a critical light on Malaya's actions and mental state. The recently leaked messages are no exception. They, too, align with the version of events Daniel first revealed that night. The recent messages from Daniel did not surface through hacking or a secret leak. These messages appeared in the comments section of a public group focused on the search for Jack and Lily, a group likely titled something like, "Ring Lily and Jack Home." It wasn't a private forum. It wasn't encrypted. It was out in the open, where anyone could see, respond, and, crucially, screenshot. One of the group members captured Daniel's responses and reposted them across multiple platforms. It didn't take long before they were circulating beyond the group, sparking both curiosity and controversy. The timing of these messages mattered. Daniel chose to speak up in late June 2025, nearly 2 months after Jack and Lily disappeared. By then, frustration with the RCMP had reached a boiling point. There had been no meaningful updates, no arrests, and no official shift in the investigation. For many, it felt like the case was stalling. People were tired of waiting. Even in the midst of rising suspicions and emotional collapse, Daniel's messages reveal a lingering instinct to protect Malaya, despite mounting doubts. In one breath, he claims, it's not her. She's not the one hiding them. But in the next, he shifts the blame to her mother. Malaya is being controlled by her mom. The contradiction is stark. He's acknowledging something is wrong, yet pulling the weight of accountability off her shoulders. This emotional whiplash suggests more than confusion. It hints at a deeper conflict within Daniel. Part of him may still care for her. That attachment could be clouding his judgment, leading to an uneven portrayal, accusing, yet excusing, exposing, yet defending. There's also a trace of the rescuer complex in his tone, as if he sees himself not just as a witness or a victim, but as someone who was meant to save her, if only she had let him. I went looking for the kids in the woods. I believed her. With this short confession, Daniel tried to position himself not as a suspect, but as someone who was missiled, someone who acted in good faith. The statement carries a quiet admission that he was wrong, that the trust he gave was misplaced. Whether intentional or not, this line subtly reveals a shift in awareness, a delayed realization that what he once accepted as truth may have been a carefully constructed lie. Daniel's messages reveal a man caught in the grip of psychological turmoil, torn between what he knows and what he dares to say. At one point, he interrupts himself mid-thought, writing simply, "I'm saying too much." It's not just a slip. It's a window into a mind afraid of the consequences. There's a clear sense of fear, not just for what he might uncover, but for what it might cost him. He knows that speaking further could implicate people he once loved, people he might still care for, despite everything. The guilt is palpable, as is the pull toward redemption. He wants to do the right thing, but that means turning his back on someone he once tried to protect. He even admits he can't go to the reservation where Jack and Lily are rumored to be hidden. Not because he doesn't care, but because it's too dangerous for him now. His words expose a deep internal conflict, guilt over silence, fear of truth, and a desperate attempt to distance himself from what might already be too late to undo. On top of the texts, Daniel offers a deeply personal and troubling glimpse into what he claims was Malaya's long-hidden psychological struggle. According to him, the issues began shortly after the birth of their daughter Meadow. No one knew, but her postpartum depression started right after Meadow was born. He frames this as something she masked from everyone, a silent unraveling that he only began to understand once he was already in the middle of it. He describes moments from their time together when Malaya would spiral into intense emotional states. She was constantly ranting about trauma during Meadow's first year. I had to tell her to stop. The tone suggests not just frustration, but a sense of helplessness. Daniel seems to be painting a picture, a woman consumed by her own pain, trapped in it, and unable to process or regulate her emotional responses. He implies that this wasn't a one-time episode, but a recurring pattern, something emerged especially under stress. She can hold it together for a while, Daniel noted. But she crashes when her mental health is tested, like during exams. This detail feels telling. It suggests that her emotional stability was conditional, fragile, and vulnerable to pressure. It wasn't the kind of resilience that grows through hardship. It was the kind that frays at the first sign of it. In the same series of leaked messages, Daniel makes a bold and unsettling claim. He says the disappearance of Jack and Lily wasn't just a tragic accident or a mother acting alone. According to him, this entire situation has been shaped, if not orchestrated, by Malaya's family. He insists that there's been interference from the very beginning, and that the truth has been kept buried not by circumstance, but by design. This isn't just about her, he wrote. Her whole family is involved. I know exactly who took the kids. That statement alone shifts the entire framing of the case. Daniel doesn't speculate, he claims certainty. He says he knows who removed Jack and Lily from the picture. He doesn't name the person in the leaked messages. But his words echo something that Darren Geddes, a close contact involved in the case, had said earlier. Darren had pointed to a possible suspect, a male cousin of Malaya's. Someone in the family, close enough to help, hidden enough to avoid attention. Daniel's message appears to confirm that suspicion, not as theory, but as fact. In one of the more emotionally charged parts of the messages, Daniel makes a stark distinction between how Malaya treated Meadow versus Jack and Lily. He claims that Meadow was the only one Malaya truly bonded with, describing her as the only child she ever really loved. According to Daniel, the bond between Malaya and Jack and Lily was distant, sometimes even cold. He insists that it was he, not Malaya, who provided their daily care, who cooked their meals, helped with homework, and tucked them in at night. He refers to himself as the real caregiver, the one the kids trusted, leaned on, and ran to when they were scared. They loved me more than they ever loved her, he wrote. Without hesitation, the message is clear. He's not just trying to protect his own name. He's arguing that Jack and Lily saw him as their true parent, not the woman who gave birth to them. Among the debates of the leaked texts, the authenticity of them attributed to Daniel has been a subject of intense scrutiny. But several key factors strongly support their legitimacy. The primary confirmation came from a livestream host herself, who stated during the broadcast that she received the messages from a trusted insider within a private group. While she deliberately chose not to reveal the group's identity, out of respect for privacy and to avoid unnecessary conflict, she was clear and confident in her assertion. These are real messages. You can go into Daniel's account and find them yourself in his comment history. Further strengthening the credibility of the messages is the identification of Daniel's accounts. He is known to have two, an older one that includes photos with his former partner Christy, and a newer one featuring a profile picture of him with Meadow, his youngest daughter. The livestream host emphasized that the account linked to the messages matched the newer one currently being monitored by the online community. This visual confirmation added another layer of reliability, helping distinguish the messages from potential impersonations. Linguistic consistency also plays a major role in verifying authorship. The tone, expressions, and phrasing found in the messages are unmistakably in line with how Daniel has spoken in previous public settings. He often peppers his speech with emotional swings, informal slang, and moments of self-reflection, such as admitting, "I'm saying too much," a phrase repeated in both his livestream appearance and private exchanges. This style, recognizable and erratic, is the same one people familiar with Daniel have noted in his past interactions with Belinda and others connected to the case. Beyond voice and style, the actual content of the messages aligns with facts that had already been publicly known. For instance, Daniel's claim that Malehya told someone the children were in the woods mirrors earlier comments shared by Belinda. His suspicion of Cindy's involvement, his concerns over Malaya's postpartum depression, and even some anecdotes about their household life had all been touched on during live streams, social media posts, or comment threads weeks or months prior. This internal coherence lends weight to the theory that the messages weren't fabricated but were instead a continuation of a larger, ongoing narrative. Still, there are reasons why some people in the community remain skeptical. Even Daniel himself seemed aware of the implications of his candor. "I'm saying too much," he wrote, possibly hinting at internal conflict, or that he was revealing more than he was supposed to. This kind of statement leaves room for doubt. Critics point out that no official livestream or video captures Daniel typing these exact words in real time. The evidence, at this point, consists primarily of screenshots. That limitation opens the door to questions about manipulation, selective leaking, or strategic storytelling designed to sway public perception. Moreover, theories persist that Daniel could be using a cloned account or engaging in calculated information drops to shape the narrative in his favor. The absence of real-time verification keeps those doubts alive, even as the balance of evidence leans toward authenticity. In the end, while the screenshots cannot offer forensic proof, the overwhelming alignment in voice, content, and behavioral patterns strongly suggests they are indeed Daniel's words, and perhaps his most unfiltered ones yet. The current status of Daniel Martell. At present, Daniel remains a free man. There has been no official indication that he has been arrested, charged, or placed in custody in relation to the disappearance of the children. Despite ongoing suspicions and swirling speculation, he has not been legally detained, and there's no sign of formal accusations against him. What's more revealing, perhaps, is his gradual re-emergence into the public eye. After a long stretch of silence, Daniel has resumed speaking with media outlets. He's done interviews, he's given statements, and he's even offered emotional recollections of his experiences. This return to visibility suggests something deeper. He's no longer under the same intense scrutiny that he once was. His words, his presence, his behavior, all of it paints the picture of a man who's no longer the primary focus of the investigation. This shift became particularly clear during one of his more recent interviews, in which Daniel himself stated that law enforcement had told him they had completed their inquiries into his role. He spoke calmly, if a bit guarded, saying that he hadn't heard from the police in a while. The frequent check-ins, the sudden visits, those had stopped. And that alone seemed to offer a strange kind of confirmation. Daniel was no longer a priority. Whether or not the public believes in his innocence, it appears that the authorities may have at least moved on to other angles. Further solidifying this perception was a deeply emotional moment captured in a recent photograph. Daniel holding Meadow. The image circulated online, sparking waves of reaction. Meadow, his biological daughter, is currently in the care of Child Protective Services. The fact that Daniel was allowed to see her, to physically embrace her, says more than words ever could. It implies that he passed a level of vetting. It suggests that, at least in the eyes of CPS and potentially law enforcement, Daniel does not pose an imminent threat to the child's safety. A visit like that doesn't just happen. It has to be cleared. It has to be earned. And that moment, that picture, may speak louder than any courtroom statement. Daniel's presence in the media further indicates a man trying to reclaim a voice that had, for a time, gone silent. In earlier days, he vanished from public sight. No interviews, no statements, just absence. But now, he speaks again. One viewer of his latest interview said plainly, "Daniel, since you're the one speaking out there, and even though you're saying that you tell the truth, just tell the truth." It was a challenge, a plea, maybe even a warning. But it also confirmed what we already suspected. Daniel is talking again, and people are listening. That said, not everyone is convinced. Skepticism still clings to Daniel's every word, and not without reason. There's a prevailing sense among the public that something's off, That if he truly had no idea what happened, his responses would be cleaner, more focused on the children rather than himself. Some of his media appearances have come under fire for being too much about me. Me, me, as one critic put it. Others have pointed out that he speaks in vague terms, that he recycles the same answers, and that when asked hard questions, he skirts them. One especially haunting quote from Daniel caught attention: "If I have to, I'll search for the rest of my life." On the surface, it sounds like devotion, commitment, even heartbreak. But to others, it landed like a confession. One commentator responded to that line with worry. That gives the indication that you know that you're never going to find them. And that's worrying. It's the kind of statement that can be read two ways, either as a father's relentless hope, or as a man grappling with a truth too awful to say aloud. Still, the fact remains, Daniel is not behind bars. He's not hiding. He's showing up, giving answers, standing in front of cameras. That kind of behavior isn't typical of someone with something major to hide. But it also doesn't mean innocence. It might mean strategy. It might mean nerves. It might be damage control. But it might also be a man trying to navigate the unthinkable with no manual, no support, and no guide. People close to the situation have weighed in on his recent conduct. Belinda, the grandmother of the missing children, made it clear that Daniel has not been communicative with her, even though she reached out. She sent him a message after her last contact, and while he read it, he didn't respond. That silence struck her. It struck others, too. If he truly wanted to help, why not answer? If he truly had nothing to hide, why pull back? And yet, those questions remain unanswered. He continues to speak with the media, but not with the people most affected by the tragedy. Some have gone so far as to suggest that Daniel may have lied, not out of malice, but out of love. One source close to him stated that Daniel made mistakes, that he told some lies, and that he did so because he was still deeply in love with Malaya. He was still so in love with Malaya that he was fantasizing they'd get back together. The person said, "That kind of loyalty, that kind of heartbreak, complicates the narrative. If he did lie, and if he did it to protect someone he loved, does that make him complicit, or just broken?" From the outside, Daniel's behavior creates a split reaction. Some see a grieving man, overwhelmed, lost, trying to do the right thing, but stumbling through it. Others see avoidance, misdirection, and deception. The truth may be somewhere in between. What's undeniable is that Daniel's actions and inactions continue to shape the public's perception of this case. He's a man standing in the middle of a storm, trying to hold his ground. Whether that storm is of his own making is still unclear. Whether he's weathering it or simply waiting for it to pass is something only time will tell. But for now, he walks free. He talks freely. He visits his daughter under the supervision of a system that no longer seems to view him as a danger. And that, more than anything, might be the most telling fact of all. Is Daniel protecting Malaya? The inconsistencies in the timeline recently have been mentioned and were clarified by someone who lived right next to Daniel and Malaya's home. It was Janie, Daniel's mother. On the morning of Lilly and Jack's disappearance, according to Darren, known as Darwood O'Grady, who revealed a lot of information of this case a few days ago, a relative of the children's mother Malaya, Janie's presence at the scene was entirely unexpected. Malaya and Daniel had both believed Janie was away, perhaps staying overnight somewhere with a boyfriend, or simply out on a short trip. As Darren puts it, Malaya didn't realize Janie was home that fateful day. And as far as Daniel and Malaya knew, Janie wasn't in the camper. That misunderstanding, intentional or not, set the stage for what unfolded next. Malaya chose that particular time to act. Daniel was sleeping, and with Janie supposedly out of the picture, there would be no witness. But Janie was there, in her trailer on the property, and more importantly, so was her dog. What Janie heard that morning is what makes her account crucial. She was awakened by the sound of her dog barking, a dog known to react to anything unusual. But before the barking, There were the children's voices. Janie heard Lily let out what Darren described as little screaming thing, but clearly loud enough to trigger her dog and wake Janie up. She also heard Jack saying something indistinct. A sound of movement and chatter from the children. Something clearly out of the ordinary. The dog's reaction acted like an alarm, cutting through the early morning silence and pushing Janie to rise and check what was going on. From inside her trailer, she could hear them moving, Malaya and the children. According to what she told Darren, Janie distinctly heard the sound of Malaya taking the kids out. She could hear them walking. Darren recalled. Took them out the back door, out the outside the fence onto the driveway. This wasn't some vague impression. It was footsteps, direction, and purpose. Janie recognized it, knew the rhythm and weight of someone guiding small children, and heard it moving away from the yard. She heard them do. This account gains even more credibility through a physical detail Janie shared with Darren. The night before, in the rain, she had taken a shovel to patch up a pothole and a small ditch on the far edge of the driveway. The gravel was soft, muddy. Not really good clean stone, Darren said, and the rain had left it damp and pliable. It was at this very spot that a single small boot print was later discovered, sunk into the fresh fill Janie had laid. That's why the little one, boot print, got sunk in the mud right at the edge. Darren explained. Janie had shown it to him herself, pointing out the very location. This wasn't secondhand speculation. It was physical confirmation that someone, most likely one of the children, had walked that path. Just as Janie said she heard them do. Adding to the weight of this finding, Darren noted that the scent dogs deployed during the search lost the children's trail right at the very beginning of the driveway, specifically the same spot where the boot print was located. According to him, the dogs could not trace any further scent beyond that point, suggesting a possible vehicle pickup. In other words, if the children had continued on foot, the dogs likely would have followed their trail. The fact that they didn't implies that Jack and Lily may have been taken from that location, lifted into a car, and driven away, leaving no scent for the dogs to follow. This disturbing possibility reinforces Janie's account and raises the haunting implication that someone was waiting there to take them. Janie stepped out of her trailer after knowing the kids were out there just moments earlier. As she approached, she saw Malaya standing outside in the yard, holding baby Meadow on her hip, and staring down at her phone. There was no urgency in her body language, no sign of distress. She wasn't searching, wasn't calling out for the children. She was just standing there. Janie asked directly, "Where's the kids?" She had just heard them. Their voices were still fresh in her ears, echoing with that unmistakable liveliness. But Malaya didn't respond right away. Darren would later describe her reaction as stunned. Like she had been caught off guard, like she wasn't expecting Janie to be there at all. Her face froze for a second, then she said, "They're in the woods." That answer didn't sit right with Janie. She pressed again. "How long were they gone?" Malaya replied, 20 minutes. It was a strange number, too round, too rehearsed. It didn't match the immediacy of what Janie had just heard. If the kids had really been gone for that long, why had their voices just been audible from the trailer? And even more puzzling, Malaya didn't follow up with any questions of her own. She didn't ask what Janie had heard, didn't act alarmed or confused. She didn't rush to look for them, didn't call their names. Her focus remained fixed on her phone, as if nothing had just happened. That wasn't the reaction of a mother whose young children had wandered into the woods. It was the reaction of someone trying to maintain a story she wasn't expecting to be challenged on. There was no one else around during that exchange, no one to witness it except Janie. And yet, the way Malaya behaved, the absence of panic or urgency, and the simple fact that she didn't seem surprised that the kids were gone, all pointed to something off. She didn't even show the basic confusion of someone being told their kids might not be where they thought they were. Instead, she offered answer without conviction, standing quietly, holding her phone, as if already resigned to a plan in motion. Daniel and Malaya's statements about the morning of Lilly and Jack's disappearance have drawn growing suspicion in their purposes, especially as new details continue to surface that contradict their original narrative. One of the most glaring red flags is the timeline they offered. According to their account, neither of them noticed the children were missing until 9:40 a.m. That's almost mid-morning, an unusually late time for any parent of young kids to realize something's wrong, let alone with 3 children in the house. With Jack and Lilly being only 4 and 6, and Meadow just a toddler, it seems implausible that 2 adults could go that long without seeing or hearing from any of them. In homes with small children, silence isn't comfort. It's usually the first sign that something's wrong. Yet both parents told that they remained unaware until nearly 10 a.m., a detail that casts serious doubt on their version of events. Adding to the concern is Daniel's own admission, given not to police, but to Darren, that he deliberately misled the public and authorities. Darren confronted him directly, asking why Daniel told everyone he had been searching the woods if he knew the kids hadn't gone that way. Daniel didn't deny it. He simply said, "I still love Malaya and I was trying to cover for her lie." That one line flips everything on its head. It confirms that Daniel was aware the children hadn't wandered off into the woods, yet he still chose to perpetuate that narrative. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't panic. It was calculated. It was someone knowingly obstructing the truth to protect the person he still had feelings for, even if it meant derailing an entire search operation. This admission is more than just emotional entanglement. By intentionally claiming the children were lost in the woods, Daniel may have derailed critical early efforts to locate them. Search and rescue teams spent countless hours combing through forested areas under false pretenses, possibly wasting the narrow window in which the children could have been recovered, if they were even still in the area. His false claim muddied the information stream, confused the public, and redirected valuable resources. More than that, it gave Malaya time to cover her tracks, dispose of evidence, or move the children elsewhere if she truly had something to hide. There's also the striking absence of genuine urgency in their behavior. Neither parent is reported to have taken swift, visible action the morning the children went missing. There's no mention of frantic searching, calling neighbors, or alerting police the moment things felt off. Instead, there's just that one vague timestamp, 9:40 a.m., and an unclear, somewhat hollow reaction to the situation. That kind of passivity doesn't line up with what anyone would expect from caregivers discovering 2 children are suddenly gone. Darren also claims that Malaya repeatedly shifted her story over time, changing key details and confusing the timeline, making it nearly impossible for investigators to trace a consistent path. In his words, these contradictions cost people valuable time, pushing them deeper into the woods, based on a story that likely wasn't even true. Daniel's narrative, meanwhile, seemed to shift in sync with hers, raising the possibility that he wasn't just passively misinformed, but actively shaping his own story to match hers. Daniel Martell's behavior throughout the investigation into Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance kept suggesting a deep, conflicted loyalty to Malaya Brooks Murray, one that may have led him to knowingly protect her, even when the truth was at stake. From his public statements to his private decisions, the pattern is consistent. He defended her, avoided blaming her, and, when necessary, diverted suspicion elsewhere. From the beginning, Daniel repeatedly stepped in to shield Malaya from criticism. While the public and media began questioning her inconsistent timeline and lack of urgency, Daniel deflected the heat. In leaked messages and comments, he emphasized that the children always came to him, not her. A subtle way of suggesting that he had been the more active caregiver, thereby taking the weight of blame off Malaya's shoulders. This was not just a defense, it was a strategy. By repositioning himself as the primary figure in the children's daily lives, he attempted to insulate her from accountability. When directly questioned about Malaya's behavior on the morning the kids vanished, Daniel often dodged the hard questions. Instead of giving clear, factual responses, He spoke in vague generalities, never confirming or denying the most crucial parts of her story. This refusal to clarify critical discrepancies, such as who last saw the children, or what time exactly each of them woke up, kept her version of events from being directly contradicted by him. It's as if he was trying to keep their stories in parallel, avoiding any detail that might expose a lie. This evasiveness extended into his cooperation with law enforcement. Multiple times, Daniel reportedly declined to directly confirm points that would have helped investigators compare and verify both his and Malaya's statements. He didn't refute her version of events, but he didn't strongly support it either. He existed in that gray space, enough to appear helpful, but not enough to damage her narrative. That kind of half-cooperation is often more damaging than outright silence, because it clouds the timeline with uncertainty. When Malaya made statements that were likely false, such as unclear whereabouts or vague actions during the crucial morning hours, Daniel didn't correct her, even though he was in a position to do so. His silence in these moments became a form of passive protection. It allowed her statements to stand uncontested, buying her more time and casting doubt on suspicions that might have otherwise intensified. Even more telling is how Daniel consistently redirected blame away from Malaya. Instead of exploring the possibility that she may have played a role in the children's disappearance, he floated other theories: a possible abduction by a stranger, a lapse in neighborhood security, or some outside failure. By putting the focus on external threats, Daniel subtly reinforced the idea that Malaya was just another victim, someone overwhelmed by grief, not deception. However, this dynamic shifted when Daniel learned that Malaya had defied CPS and fled with Meadow, their biological daughter. During a live stream, Daniel's tone changed drastically. For the first time, he began expressing fear, not just for Jack and Lily, but for Meadow. He revealed that Malaya was supposed to be under 24/7 supervision from CPS and had broken protocol. He said she was terrified investigators are close, and was now running from RCMP. He voiced deep concern. Now Meadow is at risk of being taken. It was clear he no longer had any control or access. He had been cut off from daughter entirely. In that livestream, Daniel painted a very different picture of Malaya than the one he had previously protected. He described her as emotionally unstable, shaped by trauma from a previous relationship, and behaving erratically, especially after a brief, private conversation with her mother inside an ambulance. She told RCMP she felt safe with me, he said, but 5 minutes in an ambulance with her mom, and she came out a different person. These words marked the beginning of his public disassociation from her. But even then, he still didn't accuse her of harming the children. Instead, he clung to the belief that they were alive, citing polygraph results as proof that everyone passed. Daniel's protection of Malaya wasn't just about love, it was about fear, control, and loss. In his mind, defending her might have been the only way to stay close to Meadow, to avoid triggering a separation he clearly dreaded. But once he realized she had taken Meadow and gone underground, his protective instinct turned into panic. The betrayal seemed to shake something loose in him. For weeks, he had shielded her. Now, he feared her. In the age of viral headlines, lightning-fast opinions, and armchair detectives, Daniel has become a symbol of something larger than just one man's story. At first, he was painted as the villain, the suspicious boyfriend, the man who might know more than he was saying. Every word he spoke, every tear he shed, was picked apart in online forums and live-stream chats. To many, he was the person most likely responsible for the disappearance of the children. But now, months later, that narrative has begun to shift. Today, he stands as a man trying to see his daughter again, fighting through legal systems and public judgment to clear his name, to prove that he is not what so many believed him to be. This transformation is a reflection of our modern world, where guilt and innocence are often decided not by courts, but by comment sections. Daniel is, in many ways, a case study of how the digital age can shape perception before the facts are all known. And yet, the truth is this: We don't know what happened. Not really. Not fully. The official investigation remains open. No one has been charged. No one has been convicted. And until that happens, we must hold space for doubt, for nuance, and for complexity. Because this story is not black and white. Malaya, the children's mother, is often spoken of with anger or pity. But dig deeper, and a different picture begins to emerge. A mother, exhausted. A woman overwhelmed. Someone who may have hidden her children not to harm them, but because she believed, right or wrong, that she was about to lose them. Maybe to the state. Maybe to her partner. Maybe to the world. Her decision to disappear with them was not an act of logic, it was an act of fear. Of desperation. That doesn't make it right. But it does make it human. Daniel, on the other hand, may have told lies. Not because he was involved in something sinister, but because he was still holding on to the idea of a family that was slipping away. He may have protected Malaya, even when she didn't deserve it, because part of him still loved her, and love, especially the kind that hasn't fully died, can blur judgment. It can make people say things they shouldn't, do things they regret. Daniel may not be innocent of everything, but he may not be guilty of what people once believed, either. Then there's Belinda, the grandmother, and Darren. They chose a different path. They chose to speak up, to ask hard questions, to tell the truth, even when that truth might hurt someone they loved. They weren't trying to destroy Malaya. They were trying to protect the children. And in doing so, they showed a kind of moral courage that doesn't always get recognized. They reminded us that sometimes, the right thing isn't the easy thing. Sometimes it means breaking family ties. Sometimes it means becoming the enemy in someone else's eyes. But they did it anyway. Because their priority was never image or loyalty, it was safety. And so, we are left with a case that challenges all of us. What do we do when love becomes a shield for silence? When fear leads someone to run? When protecting the vulnerable means turning against someone we once held close? There are no perfect answers. No easy roadmaps. Just choices and consequences. And the hope that, in the end, the truth will come to light. Perhaps the real lesson here isn't about who's guilty and who's not. Maybe it's about the danger of rushing to judgment. Maybe it's about recognizing that people can make terrible choices for reasons that still come from a place of pain. Maybe it's about the courage it takes to speak up when everyone else stays quiet. Or maybe, just maybe, it's about how easily we lose sight of the most important thing in any case like this, the children. Because above all else, this story is about them. Meadow, Lilly, Jack. They are the ones who didn't get a choice. They are the ones caught in the crossfire of adult fears, betrayals, and regrets. We may never know exactly what they experienced. We may never fully understand what happened in those lost hours or hidden days. But we can hope. We can hope they're safe. We can hope they're loved. And we can pray they find their way home, wherever that home may be. So let us leave space for truth. Let us be careful with our judgments. Let us hold fast to compassion, even when the facts remain unclear. And most of all, let us remember what really matters in the end. May Meadow, Lilly, and Jack be protected. May they be surrounded by light, wherever they are. And may justice, true, honest, compassionate justice, prevail in the end. It's been nearly 2 months since this case first captured the nation's attention. In that time, a flood of information has emerged, some confirmed, some still unverified. Rumors, statements, interviews, and silent gaps have all shaped a story that feels both overwhelming and incomplete. Yet, beneath the chaos, there's a growing sense that we're approaching the final chapter. Pieces are falling into place. Voices once silent are starting to speak. And though the truth remains just out of reach, it feels closer than ever. As we wait, let us hold on to hope, not just for a resolution in this case, but for justice on behalf of Lilly and Jack, and for every child still hidden behind closed doors, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Every story deserves to be seen. Every silence deserves to be broken. And every child deserves to be found.